So tonight, it's our second night, or really the first night of the beginning of the 33-week course. Yeah, last lecture, last week, we were just talking a bit about the intro, giving a bit of an overview of all the Gnostic things and the tradition, revelation, etc., which we might talk a little bit about at the end. But this week, we're talking about the four ways, which is, well, has to do with religion, which is an interesting sort of word. You know what's interesting? I've noticed that with the older generation, kind of like the millennials up, religion's like a dirty word. In fact, we don't even put it on advertising. You've got to put the word mysticism, or people just don't understand. But I'm noticing the Gen Z actually are all becoming, like, all these kids are becoming Christian now. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're actually turning to religion, and Muslims and Christians are on the rise again, you know? Not just Asians doing it, which is different, you know, because they're behind the Iron Curtain for so long, you know? And so it's interesting, you know? So Samael says that all the worlds of religions are precious pearls spread upon the golden thread of divinity, meaning that all of these schools, religious schools, you know, the Muslim schools, Taoism, Christianity and its unbelievably large amount of schisms, Buddhism, etc., all of them at some point had the teachings of the truth at some point, and were a teaching of a truth for their day and age at some point. Do you know what I mean? When Christianity came, it had its purpose and its place. You know, it had its esoteric, its inner circle, and its exoteric, its outer circle, which is the same with all things. You see the same thing in the Muslim religion, for instance. It's esoteric, the Sufis, or it's exoteric, the general. What do you call it? Is it Sunni? Is that the largest one, or Shia? I always forget. The larger one of two. Same thing with Mahayana Buddhism, and then the Lamas, the deeper interior sect. Anyway. The word religion means to reunite, or to bring back, you know, to reunite with God. The same meaning of the word yoga. But, yeah, Gnosis isn't a religion by any means. But what we're talking about is the ways that people look for spiritual fulfillment. The way that people look for the path back to the truth is always, or is going to be, or has been for many, many years, through the world's various religions. Yeah? And this has always been a path for people, you know, and that's why I can sort of see in a way that in the new generation, this sort of looking, you know, when life becomes completely unfulfilling. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't even own a house. The Gen Z, man, unless they go for, what is it, OnlyFans or YouTube, they're not going to own a house, or drug dealing. They're not going to own a house. I can't, and I'm a millennial. I'm a generation above, and I'm never going to be able to do it, you know? So the way things are, that means there's only two things, either like absolute depression or psychological rebellion, which has to be done through spirituality. Yeah, we tried psychological rebellion without spirituality, and that's actually why we are where we are here now. You sort of saw that everyone pushed away from all spiritual means and ended up in a position where they're all just really depressed and suffering, you know, because you can't be fulfilled by stuff. It just doesn't work that way. Yeah. Even if it's really nice stuff, you know, yeah, like grills, you know. So anyway, there's a teaching from Gurdjieff, who's an ancient, some hundred and something years ago, who was trying to find the mysteries. And he wrote a book called The Meetings of the Remarkable Men, which is a lovely book. It's very worth reading. And he talked about the idea that what he began to understand as he was looking for the truth, you know, looking for this way out, you know, which many, many great teachers have before. The Buddha did the same thing. Gautama Sakyamuni tried to find the way out as well. And that's where he developed the entire school of Buddhism. But all of them come to the same sort of point, you know. But what he did is, in the day, he was going through and looking for the true teachings. He eventually found the Samael Brotherhood, which was one of the last esoteric orders at that time, where he was. He was Armenian, but he was going through all through that sort of area around Europe, etc., etc., etc. I think some latecomers coming. And so, anyway, what he began to see, or what he found, when he finally found the Samael Brotherhood, when he finally found these these people who were going to teach him the actual way to find the truth inside himself. Because you can't just find it by reading in books. This is quite a common, there's like that thing where people go through all these esoteric books and they're trying to find the truth written in a back page somewhere. You guys seen the movie The Ninth Gate? That's a banger. With, what's his name? It's Polanski, isn't it? And Johnny Depp and the demon lady. And it's like, it's so interesting. It's like you're going to find the ultimate teaching. You're just going to find this one page and you're going to read it and you're going to be enlightened. Like, great. At the moment, it's everywhere. You know what I mean? Like, every bus stop you look on has got some sort of esoteric expression on it now. Do you know what I mean? And this obviously isn't the case. So there are 4 paths, yeah. And in the ancient times, a person who was looking to find that way to the truth, to find that way to the real religion, the one that really actually brings you, like really actually reunites you with your own inner being, with your own interior divinity, not makes you believe in this one thing or read this book, but brings you into contact with your own interior divinity. You actually had to go through a preparation of going through these 3 schools first. Yeah. So you actually would be, and they believed wholeheartedly that you would be reincarnated and have to live 3 lives before finding the true teaching. This is how it was in the age of Pisces. You would have to go through this incredible process of learning and studying. But even as it is, these 3 ways encompass the ways in which everyone starts to look for, on the spiritual side, how they look for the being, how they look for their own interior divinity, and on the more mundane side, on how they look for fulfillment or purpose in life. If you lose your purpose in life, well, I mean, that's where suicide comes from, and depression. And when you start to lose, when you have no purpose anymore, that's where you go, that's where you come to, or where you get to. So at that time, there was 3, and these are the three main ways. The way of the fakir, the way of the monk, which I put here is actually more to do with the Christian style monk, the emotional way. The yogi, which again is more like the Indian or Tibetan monk, the one who meditates. And these were the 3 ways. A fakir, we'll start with a fakir. The fakir is the one who performs austerities. In fact, there's a really beautiful statue it's in the Adelaide Art Gallery. I don't know, it's still there. A museum? Art gallery. And it's called the Ascetic Buddha. And it's Buddha. And he's just sitting there, and it's a bronze statue, and his entire body is just skin, bone, and veins. That's it. And it's during this period when the Buddha was trying to find the truth, and he went through the school of the fakir. And these are sort of less common nowadays. I think that's just because people are lazy, but that's probably harsh. I shouldn't say that. But you know what I mean? Like, it's less common nowadays, but it was big in its time. And that was, to spend an entire lifetime to just like raising your hand in the air. Yeah. Or the really extreme guys who like did the table, like the move like that where you're lying on the ground just on your legs, going backwards on your arms and legs like that. The guy who just stood like that, you know what I mean? Like this is austerity. You see it in, what is it? Ace Ventura: Nature Calls, when you've got the guy standing on top of the poles like that, and he's spitting at them to try and make them fall over. That's asceticism. And it's kind of dead. It's very strong in tribal cultures, although those are all kind of gone now. So we don't see so much asceticism nowadays. I'll talk about how we see it in our every day and age. But it's this idea basically of pain leading to a spiritual fulfillment. And this is very strong. And we still feel this way. It's like, when you get given a medicine and it tastes good. Do you know what I mean? Like, one of the medications for asthma is like, it's like fried onions or something with honey, I think. Do you know what I mean? Paolo made it for me. And I found it later on in a Brazilian thing. And it's like, so it tastes good. So that can't be a medicine, can it? Whereas if you drink, for instance, like Horehound, or if you have those, the lung tonic, what's it called? Those lung tonics, they're just horrible. And, or any Chinese medicine, it's horrible, so it works, right? Because it brings pain. It's horrible. You want to wash the mouth out. If you hurt, it must be good. You know, getting your back all suction cupped and, you know, sucked up with all the pain. You're really feeling it. You know, the getting yourself cracked and cracked in every different direction. If it hurts, it must be good for you. This is a general way of thinking that a lot of people begin to incorporate over time. It's like, I'm not talking about like just having a stiff neck. I'm talking about you start to get this idea of, no pain, no gain. We've got to actually, if I'm not suffering, it's not working. And a lot of people think this way. And this is the way the fakir, and to a degree they do. These guys dominate the body. The proper fakirs get their body to such a level of control that they can do things like put knives through their arms and they don't bleed and all this sort of craziness, and walking across hot coals and they don't feel it, This is fine, yeah, but they don't develop. They feel that by completely rejecting the illusion of the physical body that they reach spiritual enlightenment. But really, all they do is develop a really large amount of physical willpower. Incredible willpower of the body. Incredible, it's fantastic. But they don't develop, well, as I'm going to talk about, any of the other side. They don't develop the deeper emotion. Again, we see this in just the normal life, When you look at like like when we're teaching in the Gold Coast, I saw it, in the Gold Coast, everyone's up first thing in the morning for their jog and their work, their CrossFit. You hear the no one wants to live next to a CrossFit house because just first thing we hear, bang, crash, yeah, and and you're just like, because like it's so loud. It's like, can't you just place the giant truck tires down lightly? Is not the action of slowly bringing them down also working at you out? You know what I mean? Do you not need to throw them, bang, And so this is the sort of thing, but this is the idea. And often if you talk to people, if you talk to these sorts of people, they will talk about the euphoria of breaking through the pain barrier. That when you break through that, when you're running and you feel like you're gonna die, and then you push through it, and then you feel great. You feel fantastic because you push through the pain barrier, and it's spiritual, And it's a nice feeling, but it's not spiritual. Do you know what I mean? It's fantastic. It's euphoric. It's a great sensation of the body, but it's not the experience of the truth. That's something much more intense. Yeah. So. But I can see, and that's why people get really addicted to it. I remember the story of a lady I was working with, and she was talking about how she knew a couple who broke up because, what'd she say? A couple who trains together stays together. That's very much a Gold Coast saying, let's be honest. And you're not getting that in Mullum. Sorry. But you know what I mean? But he broke his leg, literally. Break a leg. He broke his leg. And then he couldn't train. And so their relationship just fell apart. You know what I mean? He broke it pretty badly. It was like at the knee, which is a really like a long recovery. And it was like he couldn't train with her for like 2 months. And their whole relationship just fell apart because she'd just get home and be like, how you going? And he'd be like, don't look at me. And it was just just ruined everything. And because all of it was based upon this pushing yourself, going through, So this doesn't actually awaken any consciousness, really. What's good about it is it develops discipline, which is really important for this stroke path. And a lot of people in other pursuits lack discipline, which is why they get nowhere. People take up the meditation, but then they don't do it with any discipline, so then they don't get anywhere. They don't do it every day. They don't actually work on it. People who, for instance, are very skeptical about things like the chakras and those sorts of works and different mantras in order to provide spiritual and internal powers, etc., are very skeptical based on the fact that they feel like it doesn't work, but usually they've never actually done it for a whole year, every day, for an hour, and really worked on it. Whereas the people who have seen the results, if you understand what I mean. So that's because of a lack of discipline. So the way the fakir will instill within the essence in that lifetime a great discipline within the essence. Yeah, we see that in like the military guy, he creates a good discipline in his life. That's why, the mandatory military service has its its place, apart from then the mandatory abuse that usually goes with it and then also ruins the person. So it's kind of a trade-off, isn't it? You're efficient, but you're broken. So yeah, that's the same sort of thing. We create discipline within the people, but then we also fill them full of pain. So it's not necessarily the best way to go about it. So anyway, that's the way of the fakir. As I said, a lot of people devote their life to this in a simple way. It's nowadays, there's less of people actually joining fakir religions because they just don't exist, just straight up. There's a few still in India, but they're not so common anymore. You know what I mean? They're just stories, you know, where people hear about this guy who, you know, put his arm up for 20 years and couldn't move it, and they had to bury him in a long coffin because his arm was sticking up. Do you know what I mean? So that's the way of the fakir. The way of the monk, yeah, this is the way of emotion. This is the emotion way. This is the way of devotion. So really you get it in that love God above all things, you know. This is why we see it a lot more in the Christian monks, a bit not so much in the old, even though when this teaching was first seen, he went and saw the Tibetan monks. Those Tibetan monks were much more emotional, but it's hard for us to see that as Western people. So what we're talking here is about the devotion, yeah, working in order to create a relationship with divinity, praying to create a relationship with divinity, trying to get close to something higher than trying to find something outside of myself. Yeah, this guy's not really looking. He's trying to destroy his body because the body is a sin. You know, in a way, there's like a little feeling of Catholicism in there still. If you know what I mean? And you know, it's that you're born into sin. Yeah, and so in the sense, so the monk working to have this interior relationship, praying on the knees, which activates those fantastic chakras in the knees that link us, you know, internally. All of that, right? What that does is it starts to develop our superior emotional center. Yeah, we have 5 centers. We have a motor. We'll give another lecture entirely about this. Motor, the instinctive center, the sexual center. Then we have the emotional center, and then the intellectual center. And there's also a superior emotional center and a superior intellectual center. And these are the ones that actually where we have great internal experiences. And it's true, the devotee of this path doesn't have to be like a monk. That's just a name, a title. The devotee of this path, the person who follows this sort of discipline, working to create that connection, creates a strong superior emotion and has experiences with. I'm not talking about the person who just says, I believe in Jesus and that's it. It's a very lazy man's way. I believe in Jesus and then someone dumped me and now we're all good. And I'm like, come on. Because really what I found, most of those people actually just want to have a book that's easy to quote in order to argue with other people. That's what I found the majority of, you know. And it just gives you, and one of my friends just recently converted and all he's got now is a book of higher ground to use against everybody else. And I'm like, that's fine. Actually, Tom's like, it's great. I wish you would stick with it and try and create a relationship with God. But what I'm really seeing is him just getting angry and yelling at people on Facebook, which is not really the point, is it? So anyway, so what we're trying to, they actually develop a superior emotion. And you see this, for instance, in the greats, like, you know, like you see like Mother Teresa, who created this beautiful superior emotion. She had such a feeling for humanity through her love of God. You know, you see, actually, you sort of get that vibe with the Dalai Lama too. These sort of very spiritual people who've opened that emotional center to its really high degree, you know, and you feel that superior emotion inside of them. You know, we can link, or we can have that expression, feeling, working, for instance, like listening to really beautiful classical music has that superior emotional flavor to it. When we open ourselves up, we can listen to it. The works of Beethoven, for instance, and Mozart really open the superior emotional center. They've done so many studies on that, trying to sort of show these different brain waves and mirror. But in the end, the reality is actually really meditating on that can really, really open you up in amazing ways. Because these guys were awake. That's why no one can write like that anymore. No one can write music even close to as complex and beautiful as it is. Even you try and get close. Some of the other guys tried to get close. That's why I was talking about Haydn recently. I was like, he's like budget Beethoven. It's just, he's all right, but he's just not as good. You know, you can't beat that guy. I mean, the guy was deaf and he was writing perfect music. Like, come on. Well, it wasn't perfect. He had to be a bit touched up, but you know. Mozart wrote perfect music. Actually perfect. Someone told me that once. He said what was amazing about Mozart is Mozart would just write it all on the page. And usually when you do that, when you write it all on the page, it's like it has to be cleaned up by an editor later on because you always make mistakes. But they said Mozart's was always perfect. So, I don't know. He told me that. I don't want to... I'm sure because I'm posting this on the internet, someone's going to tell you that's actually you're wrong. So, we found something of Mozart's that was corrected once, But anyway, someone told me that. I thought it was quite fantastic. So we're actually trying to have that superior emotion. So the monk is trying to create that inside of himself, yeah? And that's through this exercise of devotion, devoting ourselves to that superior force. What we're really creating, we're not looking for some giant guy in the sky with a giant beard or something or whatever, or a nice turban, depending on which we're praying to. We're trying to create inside of ourselves a relationship with our own interior divinity, our own being. Yeah, we are all a little spark, and we're actually on this path back to our own interior divinity. And when we pray, when we work deeply, when we form that connection, that's what we're trying to do. This devotion is actually trying to have this relationship. Yeah. So now the problems with this is it's very prone to fanaticism. Oh, hey, how you going?
Hey, so sorry about that.
That's all good, Jeff.
Very long drive.
Yeah. So, but the issues here is it's also very prone to fanaticism. So even though it can open if done correctly, yeah, this way will lead to the awakening of the superior emotional center. If done incorrectly, it will lead to fanaticism, which is what I just mentioned before, where instead of having this relationship with my interior divinity, having this relationship with the cosmic divinity, like for instance, with the cosmic Christ, or the cosmic Father, the cosmic Mother, instead, I'm actually just becoming very fanatical. And this actually becomes a religious hatred, which is the opposite of love. Yeah, of the superior emotional center. And as I said, it just becomes therefore a giant book of justifications that I can quote whenever I need them. Okay, and obviously that's not the practice, but unfortunately this happens quite a lot. When the person isn't actually correctly practicing that devotion, that's what happens. Yeah. Okay. As I said, in this one, of course, we see the general religious people in our world. This is all this sort of, this way of the monk. So the next one here is the way of the yogi. So the way of the yogi, this is a little bit different. Again, yogi is a word that's tricky because yoga, as we talk about it in the West, is actually fakirism, which is actually devoting your entire life to stretching your body into intense different ways. What did J.P. Sears say about it? Practice, we want to be really spiritual, practice lots of yoga, even though it's hard to tell why stretching your body into incredibly painful positions makes you more spiritual, And I understand that, that yoga in this path of the yogi was only just to keep your body in good condition so that you could sit for long hours in meditation without actually damaging your body. That's the whole purpose of hatha yoga. Not to be sexy, not to strike a fantastic pose, not to make good reels, or you know what I mean? Not to have a good Instagram bio, etc. But actually to just keep your body in good shape, yeah? And they didn't do a huge amount of it, just enough in order to keep going. Of course, as things degenerate, you find a lot more people sort of getting really stuck into just that and then forgetting that whole process here. Kind of like in martial arts. The original martial arts were always very spiritual orders. Judo had a completely psychological side. They actually made fun of that and were quite in The Simpsons. When he wants to go learn to do martial arts and the guy says, that's great. Before you use your head to break a block of ice, you need to fill it with knowledge. And so instead of going and doing fighting, he's supposed to just start by reading this great book, And that's how it was for a very long time. If we wanted to have if we were doing these sorts of martial arts, there was actually this psychological judo or the psychological karate of discipline, hard work, preliminary ethics, because of course, if you're turning yourself into a weapon, you have to have yourself in good condition. Do you know what I mean? It's like owning a gun. Do you know what I mean? You don't just leave it around so your kids can grab it. You usually have it locked away in a safe, and when they get older, you show them how it works so they don't accidentally blow their feet off, And same thing with you don't just put it under your bed so you don't accidentally step on it and blow your toes off, yeah? It's got a purpose. Remember, Pa always had it above in Little House on the Prairie, Pa had it above the front door, carefully put there. Well, it's the same thing. If you turn your entire body into a weapon, you can't be the sort of guy who gets drunk and into a fight because you kill somebody. This happens all the time. I saw this during the, there's been that big debate, which is kind of not so big anymore, but it was for a while, this whole sort of man-woman feminist talks, this big debate over whether or not women should be in men's sports. And, you know, I remember I saw a video once of a man and woman fighting, and the guy beats the woman up. You know, it's like a karate match sort of thing. And it was interesting. I like, you know, the comments are going, oh, yeah, that's what happens when you think you can get into a rah. And then I realized there was just one guy who just said, this guy shouldn't be practicing martial arts. And I was like, and I read it underneath, and someone says, what are you saying? What are you saying? She was asking for. He said, if you think this way, you should not be in martial arts. He said, you're dangerous. You're a danger to humanity. You should not be. And he wrote that, and he raised it. And then another guy said, I understand what he's saying. You can't weaponize your body if you don't have a good mind, because you are dangerous. Yeah. The idea that you think it's okay to attack a woman, or that it's okay to defend yourself by killing another person, you know, is crazy. Yeah, and it doesn't work that way. So, a bit of a side topic there, but what I'm trying to point out here, so yoga actually comes in here. Same with, as I said, I didn't mention, but martial arts. I mean, you know, nowadays martial arts has really lost that spirituality mostly. It's like it's a complete side topic now, where people will go, oh yeah, you know, there's a spirituality here, you know, and then sort of mention one or two things and not be that interested. But in the early days when I was teaching Gnosis, is about 15 years ago, I do remember I actually got martial artists through who were looking for that truth, looking for that deeper teaching, because what they realized after they were doing the martial arts, and as they were in those sort of flow states of movement, was they were actually looking for a more spiritual process in that as they were performing these movements. Nowadays, that's all kind of gone with the whole MMA scene and fighting, and it's all just now about beating people and making money, which is... Anyway, let's just not go there. Let's just not go there. So, the way of the yogi is the way of the development of the mind. Yeah. So this is yeah, as I said, this is less the kind of less the yogi is the one, you know, who we see sitting in meditation, trying to completely free his mind from creation and from illusion. That's the way of the yogi. So that's why I've written mind over matter. Yeah. So the yogi is the one who really develops the mind and the interior faculties, the chakras, working in order to have that interior work of the mind. And obviously he does this through the work of meditation. That's the key work from the yogi, the practice of meditation. Through the practice of meditation, the mind is developed to a great degree. The interior faculties start to wake up, the chakras, the clairvoyance, the clairaudience, the ability to intuition, these sorts of things become stronger. But also he contemplates the world through his own clear mind. So what he's actually trying to do is understand the reality through clearing, through using the mind as an apparatus. Samael points out that the mind can be reduced to the size of an atom to study the atom, and expanded to the size of a universe to study the universe. The mind has an amazing capacity, immense. But in our situation, it does none of those things. It just, was it belligerent? It just comes at you all day long. And it doesn't stop until you go to bed. Yeah? This is why people have beers before bed, because they just want to shut it up and sit with it almost. They try to quieten it up so they can sit down for a while. But mind, we just shut up, you know? And that's why, you know what I mean? But meditation is much better than beer. That's, you can quote me on that one. This actually works really well, you know what I mean? In meditation, we go into the subconscious, yeah? And what we slowly do is we're trying to make the subconscious conscious. Yeah, we're trying to become conscious of the subconsciousness, which is a life's work, really. Through our meditative exercise. So when a person, for instance, like takes drugs, or just drugs is a bad example, let's just stick to it. Like when a person's drinking, for instance, they do go into the subconscious, or even just heavily sleep deprived. They go into the subconscious, and you see the person becomes more, the subconscious comes out. They tell their boss what they really think of them. You know what I mean? They're not quite so worried. They're not guarding the subconscious so much. We have the subconscious all the time. Yeah, we don't want to say this to that person. Oh, I don't want to deal with that person. Oh, I'm not sure what's going on. When you're a bit tipsy, you just say whatever, you know, and you relax because the subconscious is all just coming out. But your consciousness is not awake during that process. So instead, you're actually, and what's the worst part is, when you do that, every time you do that, your consciousness becomes a little more subconscious. You actually lose consciousness overall over time. If you imagine it like a line, like a water line like that, this is consciousness, and subconscious is absolutely massive and just keeps going all the way down. Yeah. Every time that we go in, the water rises by like half a mil, tiny amount. But slowly we become more and more subconscious, meaning I can't actually function without being pissed, which is what we sort of see. But when we meditate, for instance, it's the other way around. I go into my subconscious with my consciousness open or awake as I can. And each time I become a little more aware of my unknown, I'm actually dropping that line. I'm becoming more and more aware. That's why when you go into meditation, you plunge into your subconscious, the first thing that happens as you meditate is your mind goes crazy, when in reality, you just weren't aware of all that subconscious activity. It was going on the whole time, you just weren't aware of it. All that nonsense, all those stupid thoughts that are just spinning around in your head, that was happening in the 49 levels of the mind. You just weren't aware. So as you continuously meditating, as you're continuously meditating, you will be slowly becoming more conscious of your subconscious. That is an extreme simplification of meditation in Gnosis, which is a whole next course. It goes on forever. So that's meditation. And so this is very, very important using this. Now, the problem, again, what happens very often with the yogic schools is that the people who are doing these meditation practices and doing these works in yogic schools often leave behind many texts. Like Yogananda is a good example, Sri Swami Sivananda. They write all these beautiful texts about all the things that they've understood in their practices and in their meditations and in their works. And always the same thing happens. Their students find these and become very interested because it's a lot quicker and easier than hours and hours and hours of meditation. The guys who are having these experiences are meditating like 6+ hours a day. You know, some of these guys are meditating almost all night, they barely sleep. And they're having all these amazing experiences about, you know, the regions of the Kabbalah, which is all the different interior worlds, you know, like the astral that we go to when we sleep, the world of the mind, the world of cause, which is where our karma comes from, and then the regions of the soul and of the spirit, and all that sort of stuff. They're beginning to understand all this sort of stuff. They're having all these amazing experiences about it. And then they often write books, and this sort of, then you've got all these books where it says things like, when you experience that, then you will know what becoming is. You will leave grasping behind to experience it, and all this sort of stuff. And all of their students will be like, wow, that's amazing. They may have experienced a little bit, but then they can often get a little bit stuck in just reading all the cool stuff that everyone else has done, and I forget to do my practices. I forget to do my meditations. Like, as an example, not to attack the Theosophical Society, because Helen Blavatsky was an amazing mystic, and Annie Besant and Leadbeater, they were fantastic teachers, and they've left a huge legacy in our own movement. But when I lectured at the Theosophical Society in the Gold Coast, I gave a talk. They wanted me to talk about Gnosticism. We talked about Gnosticism. And I did a 10-minute meditation with them. The room full of people who, most of them had been doing Theosophy for a minimum of 30 years. Some of them are doing for 50 years. There were some very elderly people in them. And I did a 10-minute meditation, and not a single person could stay still for 10 minutes of meditation. Not even close. They were shuffling and like dying. And when I rang the bell, they're like, whew, that was a long one. That was like a 10-minute practice. 10 minutes. Maybe it was must have been 15. Maybe that was why it was long. Maybe they only do 10. But I remember it was a very short meditation, and they were like, whoa, that was a long one. That was, geez, mate, far out. You're pushing us here. And like, we do practice in Gnosis where we literally stay up all night. Like, we start at 12. This is obviously in our advanced group. We start at 12 and we go till 7 a.m. There's times to get up and walk and stretch, but you're like meditating that whole time. You know, you're trying really hard. Yeah, you know, and every week we have a 1-hour meditation all together in a room in silence, and these guys can't. And these guys have been, technically speaking, on the amount of time studying their particular religious activity much longer than we have here, you know, and yet their results are minimal. If you talk to them about everything, they can tell you about it. They can tell you about all the regions of the Kabbalah. They can tell you all about Gurdjieff, because he's a big part of their sort of thing. They can tell you everything about, they can probably even explain this to you better than I am. Yeah. in more detail, far more thorough. But again, I'm not practicing it. So I know everything about the astral. Great. Have you unfolded into the astral before? Well, I mean, maybe once when I was a kid or something, I haven't really got time with my studies, you know what I mean, to get into the astral. But it's sort of like, I know a lot about it, you know what I mean? Like this, it's very interesting what these guys said about it. I'm like, oh, okay. But have you been there? Well, one day, eventually. Maybe next lifetime. Okay. And so this is the thing. So we're prone to intellectualism. And this happens to a lot of these sorts of esoteric-y schools. As I said, I've had many students come and go who were very interested in the doctrine of Gnosis because it's huge. It's massive. All these books I've got here are just the beginning, just on this shelf here, for sale. You like to buy books, But all that sort of stuff, right? All these sorts of books, and covering so much of the knowledge of the world and of the interior worlds and of everything, whole books on Kabbalah and about the mysteries of life and death. And Gnosis just seems to have everything inside of it. That's sort of the thing people feel when they come in, like, wow, this has just got everything. And they come and they study and they get all the books and they read all the books. And then they just sort of keep going. And they keep reading more books and more books. And then and this guy says, oh, and I got this off this guy. So they get all his books. And this guy says, yes, it was really good. I was really inspired by this guy. So they get all that guy's books, and they're reading all his books. And then that guy said, oh, and I was in this school. So they get all the books from people in that school. And before you know it, they got a huge shelf of absolutely everything that was ever written. And it's fantastic. But I always find that this is a big problem, that they struggle to practice it. They seem to know everything about it. I'll even give talks and they'll be like, oh, that was taken actually from this guy who knew this person, who got it from this person, who got it from this person. Oh, that's great. All from the original Egyptian. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. And that's great. It is very interesting. But if we're not practicing it, it just becomes very intellectual. Yeah, and that's, of course, the problem with the mind. You know what I mean? That I stop thinking that development of the... instead of looking for the development of the mind in silent meditation, I look for it in intellectual gratification. Yes, of course. And so we see this, in the very mundane, of course, we see that all the manifesting stuff is very common, that people using manifesting to do things. I'm not saying anything's wrong, I'm just explaining this, If people doing manifestation work, that's very much the path of the yogi, from manifesting car spaces to manifesting mansions, same, yeah? As I mentioned, theosophy, the whole New Age movement really sits in here, the development of interior powers, all this sort of stuff. It's all this kind of looking to find that interior being through this process here. Yeah, through this process of developing the mind and the faculties and the powers, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so the fourth way. This is the sort of point of where we're coming to in this talk. So the fourth way is, of course, what we're teaching here. We are the school of the fourth way. We're the Gnostic school here. And the first thing that differentiates the fourth way from the other three is, the first thing is we actually take just a piece of all three. Because as I said previously, a person reaching the fourth way would be given the deeper teachings to liberate yourself, but they would have to have gone through these three schools. Honestly, most people who come to Gnosis have been through many other schools of thought, have been searching in many other places. And so, yeah, we take the discipline of the fakir, we take the devotion of the monk, and we take the meditation practice of a yogi, and we bring that into Gnosis, yeah? Without meditation, we will get nowhere. Without some work looking for the being, the best we can ever hope for is developing a whole bunch of powers and just eventually walking down the path of, well, powers and black magic, etc. It's where that leads. And then without discipline, there's no point. I've been saying that the whole time. If you can't actually withhold a practice, you're going to fail both ways. You want to become a beautiful, powerful black magician, you can't do that unless you've got discipline. I mean, that's the one thing. You see these guys running the world full of greed and doing all their practices and sacrificing babies and they're full of force. At least they got good discipline about it. Sorry. You know, on this mixtape to succeed, well, we're going to have to do a very specific ritual underneath the thing, but we're going to have to do it every week. And the guy's like, oh man, that's hard. I hate killing chickens. So think what you want. I'm just being silly. So you know what I mean? So you need discipline. Without discipline of your practice, yeah, you're never going to get anywhere. So we need the discipline, we need the devotion, we need the meditation. We need all three parts of the positives of these. All of them are valid ways But as I said, on their own, they're never going to really take us anywhere truly deep. Yeah, they'll develop something within the essence, within ourselves, within our true nature, that will hopefully be good for another lifetime, but they won't take us to the ultimate experience of the truth. For that, we need the path, the esoteric path. Yeah, the path, not the journey. The journey is something else. The journey is just what we do. You know? Go on your journey, mate. That's great. The path is this here. Is this trip? Is this walking back to the being? A path of interior initiations, not exterior, only interior. A path lived by you back to the being. However, this does have very obvious signposts. It's not just simply walked by everyone who just because they feel good and spiritual and want to go back to the being. It's not enough. There are specific markers that will show that we're moving that way. Anyway, so as I said, we combine these three so that we can actually begin to walk back to the being. We can follow the fourth way, which is the path, to go back to the being. In fact, I should have written that. It's a term we use in Gnosis a lot, the path. So, okay, so first of all, one of the things that differentiates us hugely from the three ways is we are not hermits at all. These are all hermits. All three ways are hermits. They recluse themselves. The fakir has to be supported by everybody else. Like, for instance, these guys who, put their arm up forever, they have to be washed. People have to pick up, the guy who put himself in just in like the table position for his whole life. All his arms fused into place. So what happens is, like, apparently it takes 2 or 3 months, but over 2 or 3 months, you break through the pain barrier to such a degree you can't feel pain anymore. And then what happens is, though, all your body fuses. So, like, your joints and that just lock into place. But for that to work, you have to be fed, washed, and that's when the disciples used to have to carry this guy down to the river and like wash him and sort of carry him back, because he had when he was like that, he actually ended up fusing almost his whole body, because his whole body was in tension when he did it. The guy with one arm, at least he could walk around, you know what I mean, like that. And the bird supposedly created a little nest in the top. That's great. At least he could walk around. But generally speaking, they need to have a whole bunch of, you know what I mean? They need to be looked after. And so they live as hermits. They live outside of society, yeah? It doesn't really work. Imagine you're doing IT, data entry, but you're also a fakir. It just doesn't work. You imagine like this the whole time like that, And then the guy says, yes, question. No, sorry, just got your arm up. Oh, sorry. Yes, question. No, I've just got my arm up. That's just what I'm doing. He goes, look, Dave, can you put your arm down? Oh, no, I'm a fakir. Actually, I identify as a fakir, and so this is just what I'm doing for the rest of my life. And the guy said, can you please just not have the bird in here as well? It's like, it's actually shitting all over our workplace, and when you go to the salad bar, it actually just poos in the salad bar, and it's really quite disgusting, Dave. Like, I'm sorry that you can't accept me as a fakir. This doesn't work, yeah? You have to be outside society so people can then look after you. That's hermitage, right? The same thing with the monks. The monks used to live in cloisters. They lived in abbeys. They lived in buildings where the whole of society at the time, in the Piscean age, we're now Aquarian, it's a little less common, but still there. But people would just support them. The people would pay. In fact, when you hear the Dalai Lama talking about the Tibetan way in Freedom and Exile, he talks about the fact that that it was common for a certain child to always, I can't remember how many, like if you had like 8 children, if you had 8 children, he said 2 would die. So Tibetan, they're just so hardcore. 2 would die, and I think the eldest would take on the family business, and I believe something like the 5th child is the one, it was like a numerological thing, the lucky one, would be given to the monks, basically. It was kind of like a tithe, like a tax. We'll just give one of our kids to them. Do you know what I mean? And I remember the Dalai Lama's father was very upset, because the Dalai Lama was the firstborn, I believe, and he should have been taking over business, not going to the lamasery. And so he was a little bit perturbed at the idea that, the astrologers came in knocking and said, hey, we want your firstborn son. It's funny, you would assume that, he's going to be like this really famous guy, he'd be really happy, but his dad was actually not. He was like, he's my firstborn son, I want this guy to take over the family business, got to get the yaks, and, So, anyway, so again, the monks are looked after, and we don't do that at all. And or even to the point where they're put inside the walls, where they're walled up to have internal experiences, living within the cloisters, etc. There's that process in Tibet where they would put a person in a, actually lock them away for 3 years, 3 months, 3 weeks and 3 days. You know, just in a wall, just live in total darkness in order to awaken the astral. That's a lot more this actually, that process, you know, because you would have to do that in meditation or you would just go insane and wake up. And so the same thing, the yogis too, again, they live a very a hermetic life, you know, living as a hermit. Sorry, hermetic's the wrong term there. Sorry, living as a hermit and sealing yourself away from the world and, just sitting in your meditation. You know what I mean? And it's interesting how, like, we in the West, when I was growing up, this was sort of seen as quite interesting and different. But I remember watching something once. It depends on your different view. And I remember a guy, it was like someone asking an Indian guy, I think it was in a TV show in 2004 or something. And the guy was saying, all these yogis, they're just lazy. They're just lazy, you know. They're just mooch off the people. They don't want to do anything, you know. Like all they do is just sit there and they sit. That's all they do. They sit. That's it. Everybody got to feed them. It's ridiculous. You know, it was like a local merchant and what he thinks of the truly spiritual. He's like, they're just bums. I thought that was funny. You know, like to them they're just dole bludgers. That was hilarious. You know, I was like, there's obviously a difference between a dole bludger and an Australian dole bludger in India, right? So. Yeah, so again, this is all hermitage, whereas we as Gnostics, we work in the crucible of daily life, meaning that we don't leave our hard jobs. We don't, and this is common, you know, a person goes, I'm going to be really spiritual, I'm going to leave it all behind. Or I'm going to make a business out of it. You know what I mean? I'm really spiritual now, so I'm going to become a spiritual businessman. Or they go, I'm really spiritual now, I'm leaving my world behind. I'm a truly spiritual person. Now I can't be a landscaper anymore. I'm a truly spiritual person. I can't clean windows or clean toilets. That's it. I'm a spiritual person. I just wander the streets and people tell me how fantastically spiritual I am. Again, so what we're looking for is actually to understand ourselves, and we want to do this in a radical way. Now, when you live in a hermitage like this, you limit the amount of impressions which you receive from the outside world. You limit the negative impressions of society. Like when you go out bush and it's just fantastic. It's beautiful out there and you feel great. You know what I mean? It's the same. The hermit just goes bush and, okay, has to deal with his head a little bit. But at the same time, you know, he doesn't have to deal with the whingy neighbor, you know? This is true, but in the last center, the last two centers, sorry, my dad's neighbor, she wasn't all there. She must have had a bit of dementia or something. She just wasn't all there. And she accused him of stealing her downpipe on like a 70-year-old house or something. It's not a 70-year-old house. It's like an old bloody weatherboard. But like she accused him because there was this storm and my dad's one of those people, like he lives in a rental, but he'll just fix it up like it's his own. And the downpipe just got totally stuffed and it was like these big storms. And so he just replaced it and he just went and got a fresh pipe and just fixed it all up nicely and then replumbed it in so it was just not pouring water all over the veranda. And while he was doing it, the lady started yelling at him and she was like, "You stole my pipe." And he goes, my father's quite rational. He goes, "Well, when did I do this?" She goes, "Yesterday. Yesterday was a storm, like a full storm. Like it was literally like a proper Byron cyclonic storm, you know, when it just comes down and like it's raining sideways and heavy." And he just goes, "Are you trying to say," it's very awkward, I was like, "You trying to say to me that I walked over to your place in the middle of a storm and took your pipe and replaced it with," because her pipe was still there. He said, "Your pipe's still there." And she goes, "No, it's your pipe." And he goes, "The rusty old pipe." She goes, "You're trying to tell me that I took off my rusty old pipe in the middle of a storm, it was pissing down, and I went and put it on and took your new pipe, which wasn't new, but whatever, and then replaced it with my pipe." She's like, "Yeah." And he's like, you know, and so then eventually her like children came over who were like in their 40s and 50s, so, you know, children, but she's like 80 or something. And my one of them came over, he's like sort of, you know, it's just classic Australian tough guy, and walking over and chatting, and he goes, "What did you do with my mum's pipe?" And my dad's like, trying to be the voice of reason. I just, let's just talk for a second. He goes, "This is a brand new, I have the receipt. This is a brand new pipe from Bunnings. This is just a brand new piece of PVC pipe." And he goes, "Have you thought about the situation? Have you thought about the idea? Why would I take my pipe off and swap it with her pipe? Not to mention in the middle of a storm. Like, why would I do it?" He goes, "Because you're a sicko that preys on old women." It's just like, he goes, there's obviously something going on earlier. There was obviously issues already there. You know what I mean? After that, and every time he'd see him, every time he'd see her later, she'd yell at him, "You took my pot!" Every time he saw her. So every time he goes outside, if she's there, it's like one of those it's one of those old fences that are like 1.4, 1.2. So she'd just walk out, and then "You took my pipe!" It's just like, Jesus. Now, that is a great moment. That is a great reflection on society. Now, again, if you live above a beautiful hermitage overlooking a fantastic waterfall where you drink from the fresh stream every day, and you've got like cress growing in there and you eat the cress, and I don't know, like you've got some milk from some cow sitting there, great. You're not really dealing with that, are you? You know what I mean? You don't have to die much to your ego. You don't have to, you know what I mean? Because most of the situation surrounding's fine. So just working on developing your interior faculties is pretty good. Your consciousness expands quite easily because you're not assaulted constantly by the outside world. You're not just being made sick constantly by like everything. Pollution, spike proteins, what are we going to go through here? You know what I mean? Like the whole of this society is trying to kill you right now. Do you know what I mean? It's just so toxic. Microplastics, that's the new one. I'm saying it's legit, but it's the new one. Lead poisoning. What else? Concrete. What's it? Radiation. 5G towers. Jesus Christ. You know one that got me? I had the asbestos guy come around to our house to remove some asbestos. You know what he said to me? He said, concrete's just as bad as asbestos, eh? I'm like, what? He goes, yeah. He said, but they can't say it because if they did, we'd be in so much trouble. He said powdered concrete, they've done tests. It's just as bad as asbestos. It's just as bad. But if they say it, the whole world's finished. Silica dust is terrible. It's absolutely terrible. It's like, anyway, let's not go. Concrete dust too. It's got like lime in it, and let's not go. Eats your lungs. But that's raw concrete. You know what I mean? So, you're not even dealing with that. You're not waking up being like, and just coughing all of the trying to kill you out every morning, You're not, you know what I mean? Like, you're not going through that. You just, again, the beautiful stream. I understand the allure. In fact, this is the place, I mentioned this last class, this is the place of going, what does Jerry Seinfeld say? F you, I'm starting my own people. This is what it's like. This is the place of get a patch of land and go off grid and, create your own self-sufficient farming situation, yeah? Because you're just sick of everything. That's fine. But again, it's not going to take you to the truth, yeah? You'll live a nice life, but then that's it. You have to come back and you're going to have to go through the same problems and pains again. So if you're actually looking to get off this horrible carousel of doom, well, then you're going to have to start by practicing what we call in Gnosis the 3 factors. And the 3 factors are the 3 factors of the liberation of consciousness. They are the death of the ego, the practice of sexual alchemy, and sacrifice for humanity. And in a way, this one here is actually practiced to some degree by these 3 usually. It depends on how much of a hermit they are. Some of them still do a little bit of work. But they don't practice these 2, not at all. Yeah. There's some degree of sort of as I said, of the acknowledgement of the ego in here, but not to the degree that we're going to talk about. So, so the ego, of course, and we'll go much deeper in later lectures, but the ego is its desire, it's the essence, which is our true interior nature, that has become bottled up over many lifetimes and now sees the world through a conditioned lens. Yeah, the love of the natural force of love that is a virtue of the essence now is like the love of flesh, lust, the love of social, political, what is it called? Love of like social standing, pride, the natural dignity that we have of knowing that I am the essence that comes from my interior being, knowing of my own interior divinity and all of its parts, is now replaced by being above everybody else in the room. You know what I mean? Or being smarter than certain people. You know what I mean? Or trying to put it becomes this sort of pushing everybody down to lift me up. and this is obviously personal to each person. And so this is the ego. And really the ego then creates a fragmentation of consciousness. Where I once had a psychology that's whole, I now have all of these little sort of separate ways of thinking, feeling, and acting. Yeah? The little separate feeling, the little separate part of me that gets angry, you know what I mean, and breaks my phone, doesn't talk to the avarice that likes my money that then has to pay for it. Do you know what I mean? And you often find yourself, oh, why did I do that? I was dumb. Why did I do that? You know, or the other ego comes in to defend you instead and go, oh, I had to do it. It's just society. You know, I had no choice. If it weren't for this horrible social construct, I'd be happy. Come on, yeah. So there's a little bit of truth in there, but I'm not going to go into it. So in a sense, we have this sort of fragmenting occurring, and as we dissolve the ego in our daily life, yeah, in the mirror. In the mirror of, what do you call it? The mirror of life, you know, the mirror of our social interactions, the mirror of dealing with people, with society, with everything. Yeah? We are shown ourselves, and we can actually dissolve this ego completely. We can free ourselves 100% from this desire, from this ego, from all of these parts, and actually free all that essence that is contained and bring it back to an integral whole once again. And then that will become what we call in Gnosis soul. When the essence becomes whole again, it crystallizes into what's called soul. And the word soul means the mediator between man and God. Once we have that, we can actually move up and down here much easier. So that's the ego. And again, as I said, these guys sort of start a little bit. There's a little bit of observation of the ego here, but not actual proper death of the ego. And then the alchemy, that's what we talked about very strongly last week, and we'll talk about it again through the course. All of these are talked about throughout the whole course. The alchemy is the sexual work. So the alchemy is the work of transmuting our sexual energy. As a single person, it's a level of breath work. We're trying to actually move our sexually creative energies that are, you guessed it, in our sexual organs. We're trying to move them up. Yeah, we're trying to move them up to the brain and also back down into the heart. It's a bit of high up for the heart, isn't it? Like that. This is the mystery of the shepherd's crook. And this will eventually result in the awakening of the Kundalini fire, which is the true power of man and woman, mankind, I mean, yeah. And so this process, we can do a little bit singly in breath work. The practice of Hamsa, which is breathing in and like that, moving our sexual energy through pranayama. But the real work, the one that really changes us, is done with a partner, is sexual magic, which is the work with a man and woman in the work of creation. Just like we can create a person, we can create a child. We can also use that same sexual creative connection in order to engender our own interior worlds, yeah, in order to transmute this sexual energy. It moves much, much, much more strongly through that sexual work. Because when we work sexually united, that fire is actually is moving inside of us, and we have that creative force. And that's the only way to awaken Kundalini. There's a lot of talk about Kundalini. And Kundalini, as he said, is the fire that ascends. It's in our coccyx and it ascends up the spine like that and eventually down to the heart. When this awakens inside of us, we have an amazing power, amazing capacity. In the old school Christian Gnostic way of talking, it was called the sacred fire, yeah, or the Holy Spirit. And this was awoken, again, through sexual magic. And again, this was a secret. It has been a secret forever, but now, well, there's no point in secrets now because the world is so full of information that even if you yelled it at the top of your lungs, still no one would hear it. So we just teach it publicly. You understand? That's the whole point of Gnosis, to teach this transmutation publicly so that we can do it. Now, just a little side note, this is why I wrote this here. I did mention Gurdjieff before, if anyone looks them up, because the Fourth Way movement, Gurdjieff called his school the Fourth Way movement, and it is sort of mostly dead in society nowadays, mostly disappeared. It's still around, but not really much. he made the mistake of confusing these. Yeah. So Kundalini is the fire that ascends. It moves our sexual energy, which is always going out. Yeah, when we're in fornication and even just through the senses, constantly identified with the world. When we practice alchemy and when we transmute that sexual energy, we slowly change the direction so it's going in and up as opposed to down and out. Now, the Kunda buffer, or Kunda Tigwador, he confused it with Kundalini, and it's actually the opposite. That's the fire that descends and actually ties us to the infernos. This is the sort of, like you see often when they draw a demon or something, they give it a tail. When they talk about Lemuria in the old time, they sort of have this tail. And that tail signifies the sexual force descending and actually giving us strength and capacity, but at the price of tying us to the inferior realms of the earth. So actually making us very black in nature. That's why you see you can see people who have an absolutely amazing capacity, such force. Everybody listens to them. They've got so much power. Like you see these, like rock musicians, for instance, the whole world's just hanging on their every word. They develop this. They sell their soul in a way, but they develop this. They develop this power, force inside of them. And it's there. You see sometimes people like that because you often say to yourself, how come some person becomes more famous or more powerful, etc.? Well, because they develop this. So these are literally opposite. You can't have them at the same time. If the Kundalini awakes, it's because the Kunda buffer is being finished. And so Gurdjieff made a mistake because when he taught when he started his movement, he confused these two, which is why his movement ultimately has pretty much failed. It's kind of gone. You know what I mean? Because that's very confusing. But yeah, he saw this as negative, but then he also used the name Kundalini and then told people not to awaken it, which is wrong. Okay, so last thing here, as I said, sacrifice of humanity. This has to do with paying our karma. It also has to do with something that really works to develop the consciousness, which is what we call conscious works and voluntary sufferings, which is actually working inside of myself, working for others, taking on situations in order to actually not just better myself, but others as well. So to actually, I guess nowadays we sort of use the word be a bigger man, but really, conscious work is when we actually take something on, even though it may be difficult, because it's good for the consciousness. Dealing with someone who may be really difficult, but it gives me a really good opportunity to work on my ego, and I may actually be able to help that person. That's a conscious work. A voluntary suffering, the same, actually going out of my way to help and work for others, to pay my very karma for being here, to pay my karma of my life. Yeah. So, yes. So, what we'll be teaching in these classes is this, the fourth way. This is what we're doing. Not this. Well, yes, because we're putting it all in there. We're teaching this plus. You understand what I mean? So there's one last little thing I want to mention. Wow, it's gone late, sorry. Was that something that really typifies the Gnostic movement in the way of teaching, just because we're both sort of new here, is that this word gnosis that we use, is quite important. It means knowledge, but it means a experienced knowledge. So when I say gnosis, I'm not just talking about knowledge in regards to, as I said, what someone can read in a book. I'm talking about something, a mystical internal experience. Like for instance, a dream in the astral that actually really speaks to us is gnosis. That's what we would say. It's a Gnostic experience. Now, the thing is that for a school to move, it needs to have two things. It needs to have a doctrine, and it needs to have this gnosis, this practice. And if one's lacking, you have a problem. So, for instance, if I have like these modern religions, which I've talked about, they have the truth. Like when you read the beautiful bits from the Quran, the Bible, everything, they're really quite profound, right? And sort of everything's become a bit of a bastardization of that. You know, when people say, "Oh, just be a good guy" or treat people right, they're still just bastardizations of old gospels. But at one point, that was being experienced. Do you know what I mean? So it means at one point, when that was out, people were actually experiencing it. They were meditating deeply on it, having profound internal experiences. You know, and now though, what you have is a teaching or a doctrine, a body of teaching that no longer is experienced anymore, and so we would call that like a dead religion. Or the dead word. The word is there, but it's not being experienced. And you could read all these old books, and there's not just religious books. There are old books from like Lucretius and the Neo-Platonists and all these sorts of stuff that are amazing, phenomenal teachings, really, really deep. But no one's really experiencing them anymore. And so they're dead. There's no, as I said, like who's walking on water in Christianity? No one. You know what I mean? Who's having these deep internal experiences? No one anymore. But at the same time, if you have a school that's only about internal experiences, but with no body of teaching, well, you have this school where everyone's going around having all these experiences, but they have no idea what they're doing, And that's why you've got these huge drug movements, especially around here, not so much in Byron anymore. It's become very gentrified here, if you haven't noticed. But, more out in the outskirts. But where people are experiencing lots of things, but they don't know what they're experiencing. They have no idea. Like I go and this is lended itself very strongly to taking a lot of drugs, for instance, because I take the drugs and then I have some fantastic internal experience. I know a part of my being that comes to me as this sort of divinity, and I go, wow, I must be completely spiritually awake. I'm going to start wearing beads, and I'm going to start wearing beige, and I'm going to start my own school. Do you know what I mean? Because you don't know. You don't know what the true teachings are. You have no idea. So there's no fertile soil for that experience to land in. So experience just kind of just drops on the stones, and it just sort of, and then you have another one, then you kind of become addicted to just having all these experiences, and that's why you see people just going back to it over and over and not actually getting anywhere. And often the person burns out or whatever, That's actually what happened around here in the with all the old boomers. They all moved out here to have spiritual experiences during, in the, what's it called, the New Age of Aquarius. And they all came out here, got all these commune lands for nothing, built these huge communes, right? Took a whole bunch of drugs, had all these internal experiences, did a whole bunch of mantras, did all sorts of random Indian practices, right? That's what they did. And then just burnt out and all became full-fledged materialists. Do you know what I mean? They went both ways. There's a few of them that just still walk around here and just don't even know where they are because they really burnt out. Do you know what I mean? They're just like, oh, man, how are you going? And you got to be nice to them because that's hard. And then you've got the ones that own water ghosts. And there's like guys who own half of Federal, and there's guys who own like half of Byron Bay because they were like the last few guys still sitting around in the commune when everybody else went off to get a job. And they're like, well, we'll just own the commune now, eh? And do you know what I mean? And it's interesting to think, I just think about it sometimes. I think there used to be all these spiritual groups here and they're all just gone. What happened to them? Well, they're all just materialists now. All these guys, they're all rich. And they've got big houses. Lots of stuff. Do you know what I mean? And they got some sort of semi-spiritual stuff going on, but not really. Most of them are just complete materialists now. And that's because what they were doing was, they were experiencing Gnosis, of course. You'll have a deep internal experience if you, even taking drugs, you'll have an internal experience. But you're going to have no idea because you're not in the school that unites the two. So when I experience something that's so like for instance, I read something in the book, I pull out the esoteric book and it says, do this practice, go to the astral. I do the practice, I go to the astral. That's a living teaching. My own experience has confirmed the teaching now. The teaching is now real. And then now looking more in the teachings, I can understand more about that experience and I can even take it further, if you understand what I mean. And then the same thing, the people in that school end up helping each other because they actually have direction. So the point of this Gnostic school that we have here, this Gnostic group, is actually to guide people back. It's a teaching for the age of Aquarius, why it's so eclectic. seems to have everything because that's the way we are now. It's the religion of the New Age, which is why we come off as New Age. But we're kind of not once you actually come here and you realise. I mean, like, where are my beads? Do you know what I mean? Yeah? Where's my beige? So that's the whole thing. So this is what we're doing. We want to link that together. You have a living teaching, you know what I mean, an experienced teaching, and that's what we have in the book. So I guess to end, I would say, therefore, nothing here is to just be believed. It's all to be experienced, to be understood, so it can become your own knowledge. That's the point of this. Don't believe any of this. It's not a dogma, just teachings, yeah, that we have to put into practice. Yeah, as we go on, we're going to go through some more psychological teachings. We're going to go through some more esoteric-y spiritual teachings, but all of it is very applicable. It's something we can put into practice and we can experience it for ourselves. That's the whole process of Gnosis. Oh. What do you guys think in the front row? It's all right? Yeah, it's all right. Yeah, it's all right. Okay. Well, good time for a practice. Do you guys have any questions? No? Yes.
Recommend a good book?
Recommend a good book. Oh. Yeah. Depends what you want to read. Let's talk about it afterwards, because I'll have to have a little thinky think. But we've got lots of books for the beginning, and yeah, of course. There's about 4 or 5 books that are good to start from if you want to have a little read, get a feel. Yeah. Like the Revolutionary Psychology is always a good start. Yeah. Or the Great Rebellion, or the... That's what you already read.
Kundalini.
Pardon?
Maybe one on Kundalini.
Maybe one on Kundalini.
The way you describe it.
Yeah. The Perfect Matrimony is The Perfect Matrimony is a good book. But the problem is I'm waiting for copies of it to come from Melbourne. I'll have some. We'll have a look. I got something for you. Yeah. Good? Happy? Okay. Let's make a circle and we'll do a practice.